So we're going to talk through some of the anatomy for the upper extremity. The way upper extremity is broken down is upper extremity 1 and 2. 1 is going to be fingertips basically through the elbow, and 2 will be from the elbow through the shoulder girdle. Let's work again. This is not a comprehensive anatomic review, but I am trying to serve you in pointing out the important structures, things that you can know before you come to class that are going to help you be successful throughout the week's lectures and the activities, okay? So make sure you watch this and pay attention, and you're able to identify these structures on your own. So we'll start with the radiographs. We'll do this a little different. We're going to do the radiographic anatomy first, and then as a whole, and then I'll come back to the structures on the table as a whole. I think that that's going to serve us a little better for now. All right, so the first thing we're going to talk about are the phalanges, or individually the phalanxes, okay? The phalanges are here, here, and here. You have 12 phalanges, okay? All of those. They are broken down and categorized like this: proximal, middle, distal. Those are your phalanges, okay? Same here, proximal, middle, distal, and so on and so forth. On your first digit, what you need to recognize is that there is a proximal and a distal. There is no middle phalanx. Every year, someone gets the metacarpal confused for a phalange. Don't be that person, okay? All right, so those are phalanges, and that's how they're labeled. Generally speaking, the digits are labeled from 1 through 5, lateral to medial. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So if I asked you to identify the distal phalanx on the 4th digit, you would go to the 4th digit, and that is our distal phalanx, okay? So that's how that works for phalanges. Next, we'll talk about the metacarpals, all right? Again, these are also labeled lateral to medial, all right, across this way from 1 through 5. These are your metacarpals, okay? So your metacarpals are the part that make up the palm of your hand, all right? And again, those are labeled 1 through 5. Additionally, the phalanx, or the phalanges and the carpals, also have a couple structures within them. And these are pretty straightforward. At the bottom, that is the base of your first metacarpal, and that is the head. The head, the head, the head, the head, the base, the base, the base, the base. That would make sense. And then this is kind of considered the body. And it's the same thing on your phalanges: face, body, head, so on and so forth for each of those. So when we get really tricky, we might say, identify the head of the second metacarpal. There you are, okay? That's how that works. You should be able to go through and identify any of these structures on any projection. So this is a PA, this would be an oblique over here. And again, the structures appear slightly different, but it's the same. So if I were to ask you, what is that? You're going to go 1, 2, 3, proximal, middle. That's the body of the proximal phalanx of the 3rd digit. So that's how we would do that. We want to be very specific. The beauty of the language, of knowing anatomic language, is that it's a universal language. So when I say that, everyone who has this understanding then recognizes what structure I'm talking about, regardless of patient, position, anything. It's a universal deal. So then there are these little bones here. You can kind of see them. These are just, you've got to be able to identify those. There's another one back here too. Those are called sesamoids. Sesamoid bones are tendons that form are bones that form in tendons at points of stress. The largest one in the body, little fun fact, is your patella. You are not born with kneecaps. Mind blown, right? All right, so that's your sesamoid bones. Next, we're going to move over to your carpal bones, and we'll go to a wrist x-ray for that. Nice, bright one. There we go. Okay, so this is a wrist x-ray. Now, there are 8 carpal bones. These 8 carpal bones are identified, here's your thumb over here, from lateral to medial, proximal here, to distal. All right, so I'm going to give you an acronym, or I'm sorry, a mnemonic device for that. And this is on tape, but we're all adults, so don't judge me. This is the way I learned it. It sticks, okay? We have some, lovers, try, this is the pisiform back there, positions, back to lateral, that they can't handle. All right, that's how your carpal bones work. From lateral to medial, some lovers try positions, proximal to distal, that they can't handle. That's how I learned it. Typically with mnemonic devices, the more inappropriate, the easier they stick because they're shocking, okay? All right, so that's how that goes. So I'll walk you through what that is again, all right? We have the scaphoid, the lunate, the triquetrum, the pisiform, which is like a little P, the trapezium here articulates with the thumb. That is the only saddle joint in the body. Little fun fact there. It's what allows us our cool thumb activity, right? I'm sorry, that's the trapezium, and then we have the trapezoid, which is next, and then we have this big one in the middle, which is the capitate. It helps me to remember I think of it as the captain. The big one in the middle is the captain. And then over here we have the hamate. And the hamate, oftentimes you will see density on it. So you can kind of see it here, but not well, right here. Because the hamate has a hook on it that comes forward anteriorly. And it shows up as a radio, like a density on the radiograph. Okay, you can kind of see it on this one. Right here. So the hamate has a hook. It's called the hook hamate. So again, scaphoid, lunate, triquetrum, pisiform, trapezium, trapezoid, capitate, hamate. So those are your carpal bones, 8 of them. Be able to identify them on any radiograph. Okay? Moving on. Let's go to a forearm. Let's try that. Okay. So we have an AP and then a messed up lateral. It's not lateral enough, but the AP and lateral forearm. Let's talk about the radius and ulna. So the easiest way to remember the radius and ulna is at the humerus, it's how are you. So if you shake a hand, your thumb's up, that's the radius side, you on the bottom. So it's like a handshake. How are you? That stuck out for me. Someone told me that. All right, but here we are. We identify. We have the thumb. Here, right? That means that's the lateral side. The radius is lateral. That's your radius. That's your ulna. We can start there. And then there are specific structures on both of these bones that I would like you to identify. Starting with the styloid process. We have the styloid process of the radius right there. And we have the styloid process of the ulna medially over there. We have the radial tuberosity on the proximal end of the radius. The radial tuberosity is the attachment site for the biceps tendon, kind of comes down and attaches there. Okay. The radial neck. swoops in right here, and it goes towards the radial head. Common site of fractures, we do a specific projection of the elbow to demonstrate it. Okay, so we have the radial neck and the head. Okay? Let's see, then we have the radial notch. And you see that a little different. That's on the ulna, right there. There's a groove on the ulna where the radial head sits. Alright? So you should be able to see that too once you look at the x-rays. The olecranon process is on the ulna, and it's the posterior structure here. This is the olecranon. So when you think of the olecranon, that's like, if anybody likes MMA or whatever, an elbow. The big part of the elbow, when you think of throwing that as like a blow, the olecranon is the large process, or the olecranial process. That's the part that you would strike with, okay? When we think of the elbow, we kind of think of the olecranon, right? And then the coronoid process is the anterior projection on the proximal ulna. That is going to be right here, right there, okay? So we have our olecranon here, our coronoid there, all right? Those are the radius and ulna structures that I really want you to know. And let's talk a little bit about the distal humerus. So here's our humerus here. When an arm is extended, when this bent arm here, when you extend that straight, what happens is the olecranon process goes into the posterior fossa here, which would be the olecranal fossa. Anteriorly, when you bend it, there's a fossa on the anterior portion of the distal humerus that would work for, or which is the coronoid fossa. Right? So both of those processes have a home that they can go into, right? Let's see, the epicondyle. So above the articulating surface is epi, right? Above is epi. So this is the epicondyle. Here, this is the lateral epicondyle. Here is the medial epicondyle. What else we got here? And then we have the last two that I want you to see are the trochlea and the capitulum. So on the distal humerus, it articulates with the radius laterally and the ulna medially. The site of this articulation on the humerus side, right here, the capitulum articulates with the head. So the cap goes on the head. That's how that works, all right? The capitulum here articulates with the radial head. I don't know if you can read any of that, but that's what's going on there. Capitulum, head. And then on this side, you've got like this, there's a little, almost like a square thing. It's a trochlea, and that articulates with the ulna here. Okay? Those are some of the structures on that. And I do want to rewind a bit. We're going to go back up and we're going to talk about the joints. You do have to be able to identify all of these joints. So we'll go back and find a good one for this. Okay. Let's see. Yeah, this is all right. Every articulation here is going to have a label, right? A way for us to identify it. Like over here, where the radius, articulates with the carpals, that's going to be called a radiocarpal joint. And here would be the ulnar carpal joint, something like that. Then where the carpals articulate with each other here, that's intercarpal, right? And then where the carpals articulate distally with the metacarpals, that is carpo-metacarpal joints. There. Then we have here where the metacarpals articulate with the phalanges, metacarpal phalangeal, MCP, and then here we have proximal interphalangeal, that's the PIP, and here we have the DIP. The only other exception here then is this is just the IP, because there is no middle phalanx on the thumb side. Alright, so it's just interphalangeal joint. So, to put that together, if I said, show me the second carpo-metacarpal joint. That's right here. Right? If I asked you, identify this joint. The trapezium articulates with the first metacarpal. Oh, that is the first carpo-metacarpal joint. Okay? If I said identify the third PIP, you would say 1, 2, 3, proximal interphalangeal. That's the proximal interphalangeal joint of the third digit. Likewise, this is the distal interphalangeal joint of the fourth. All right, and that's how we describe those. So, again, to recap, we have the intercarpals, the carpal metacarpals, metacarpal phalangeal, the interphalangeal. You need to be able to identify those. This entire hand will be up for grabs for labeling now and then in the future when I come to the clinic. So you need to know those. All right. So that's the anatomy on that. Let's see here. Let's come over to the table now and discuss some of the table anatomy. Yeah, you should be able to see it pretty well. All right, we'll start with the hand. All right, now this hand's a little curled, so it stinks a little. But let's look. We'll take what we already know. We have our distal phalanx, middle phalanx, proximal phalanx, metacarpal, and then our carpals are all covered up. Let's see if we can't get those off. Yeah, now we can see the structures. Okay. And then we have our carpal bones. Alright? Let's look. So again, if we flip it over to the palm side, we see each phalange. And then we see the metacarpal, right? We see each of them. You guys are going to get time on this table to manipulate and rotate this and play with it. All right. We also have real bones in the classroom you're going to utilize as well. All right. So those, we've got our phalanges and our carpals. We just talked about the joints, but again, like this one here, third metacarpal phalangeal. This one here is going to be the fifth PIP, right? Proximal interphalangeal. So that'll come pretty quick, but you just got to spend the time doing it. All right. If we look at the carpal bones, I'm just going to tick these off as I say them. We have our scaphoid, lunate, triquetrum. All right, and then the pisiform's anterior on that. So watch this. That one right there. So in a PA, obviously, you can't see the pisiform well, but right here, right? You can see it really well. It pops out. But when they're like this, it's really superimposed. So that's what, if you were having trouble seeing that before, that's what was going on. All right, and then we come up, and now you can see how this is called a saddle joint. That's the trapezium, and then the trapezoid. And then we've got the big old capitate, the captain here, and again, hamate here. Let's see if we can't find that hook of hamate. We'll roll this to a lateral, and then you see that coming forward like that? Right here. Right here. It's the hook of hamate. And it's going to be shaped a little different on everybody, but there it is, okay? So there we have those, and then We look here at the distal radius and ulna, and we see the styloid process there of the radius on the thumb side, and we see the ulnar process, or the styloid process of the ulna on the pinky side there. And we come proximal here. Let's see if I can't spin that a bit. Those ribs are an issue. Let's get those off. Alright. There we are. Now we have a beautiful view of the distal humerus, proximal radius, and ulna. Alright, we'll talk about these structures a little bit. On the radius, you can see it here very clearly, the radial tuberosity. Alright, it's a hump. It's an attachment site for the biceps tendon. And then you can see how there's a groove on the inside of the ulna here, right? That's a fossa. That's the radial fossa, right? It makes space, or notch, radial notch, I'm sorry. It's making, the bone has space for the tuberosity to set. Then we look at the proximal radius, and we have this thinning here. That's the radial neck, and then this here is the radial head. Alright? That's the articulating surface. The radial head articulates with the capitulum, which is right here. The capitulum, the cap, goes on the head, right? Moving over to the ulnar side, let's go to kind of a lateral here. We'll see, we have the coracoid process, which is like, it sits anterior, and then the olecranon, or the olecranal process, here. And then if we really look at what I was trying to say here, actually, come on, there we go. You see that big hole back there, that fossa back there? That's the olecranal fossa. It's what the olecranon sits in when we're in extension. And when we roll to the anterior side, we see the same thing right there. Oh, we've been missing it, huh?